Like a craftsman with their tools, we all have something to offer. We have been designed with a purpose and have opportunities to influence, encourage, and inspire those around us. And simply put, it comes down to identifying the answer to one question: what is in your hand? We believe the answer to this question lies in how God designed us and what He designed us for. If you have a desire to love and lead those around you, you won't want to miss the Move Out Gathering. We have Dave Nelson, lead pastor of K2 the Church in Salt Lake City.
What God is trying to help all of us understand, it's not about the job that we're doing, it's about the essence of who He's created us to be.
We have the privilege of hearing from Brian Peterson, a designer from Kia who started a nonprofit for the homeless of Southern California.
Usually, as we paint people, they go from like fans to friends, and then some become like family.
And Danielle Strickland, author, speaker, and co-founder of 4 organizations.
Love is a means by which you can unlock the kind of servanthood that has no agenda, which is so powerful.
There will also be several workshops to choose from. You are an influencer. You have relationships. You have an opportunity to discover not only how you were crafted, but what you were crafted for.
Well, good morning. We hope that you will come out and be a part of the Move Out Gathering at the end of this month. We believe that each and every single one of you, you are a leader wherever you are at in your life. And just like that video talked about, that when you discover how God has crafted you for a specific purpose and start to live that out, how that will change how you lead in your home, in your workplaces, in your community, and even at church. So you can go online and register for that. Well, my name is Shauna, and I'm the production manager here at Clinton Township. I just want to say welcome. I'm so glad that you guys made it out there. The roads, I know, were not the best this morning, so way to trudge through that and get here to the 8:45 service. And if it's your first time and you made it here, wow, I'm really impressed. But we are so glad that you have joined us today. And if it is your first time, we'd invite you to stop by the hub after service. Our team would love the opportunity to be able to meet you, and we have a special gift that is just for you. The hub is located in the center of the lobby. There's some signs that say the hub. Some people will be wearing some orange shirts. But really, that's a place for any of us to discover more about Kensington, to ask questions, get information, and really find out how you can get connected into our community here. Now, speaking of connection, today is our Connect event out in the lobby. So I'd invite you after service to stop by one of the tables, as all of our groups and classes and courses are going to be starting up again for the winter semester here in a couple weeks. Now, we really believe that life transformation and change happens in groups by doing life with other people. And so I would encourage you to stop by and find out how you can jump into one of those groups. We have groups for all different seasons and phases of life that meet on different days of the weeks and at different times. Maybe you have some questions and you're wondering, like, what's next in my faith journey? How do I pray? Alpha might be a great group for you. Or maybe you're looking for something specific for men or women. We've got that. I know I love it. I'm part of the Tuesday nights here with the women at Encounter. I cannot wait to get back into it. So there is something for you. There's even things for kids. We have our performing arts program called Kaleo. So stop by one of the tables, talk to the team, and jump into a group this winter. Now, also out in the lobby, there is a table for the Macomb County Warming Center. We've been partnering with them over the past few years to provide safe and warm shelter for those experiencing homelessness. And we are really looking forward to be able to do this here again at the beginning of February. But here's the deal, guys. We need you. For this to be a success, it takes a ton of volunteers to put this on. And there's different things that you can do throughout the week. It's not like you sign up for the whole week. So just go by the table, talk to them, find out how you can jump in and be a part of that. Truly, you will not regret it. It's an incredible week to be a part of with partnering with the Warming Center. Now, I hope all of your 2020 is off to a great start. This week, it is the first midweek of the new year, so we're really, really excited for that. And I invite you to come back and be a part of that. And just really, as another great way to just kind of move forward in this new year, to focus our hearts on maybe what God has for you, and just to hear an inspiring message and have a great night of worship. So I would invite you to come back and be a part of that. It's going to be awesome. It's one of my favorite things we get to do here at Clinton Township. Now, today is week 2 of our series, Sermon from the Seats. And as we continue throughout the service, at this time, I'd invite you guys to stand up and say hi to someone.
Hey, good morning. Hey, give yourselves a hand for braving that weather this morning. I was on the way here and there was somebody that went there's always that one person that goes blasting by everybody. And I'm like, dude, you need to slow down. There is nowhere you need to get that fast. You want to know where they pulled into? Yeah, here. I'm going to have a conversation later today. Hey, so my name is Craig, one of the teaching pastors here at Clinton Township. And really quickly, before we go any further this morning, I want to do two things with you. One, I want to celebrate. And then two, I want to make a request. Here's what I want to celebrate. We have had incredible growth here at the Clinton Township campus in the last number of months, and Christmas was a big explosion for us. I know today is a weird day with this weather. You look around, you're like, really? I see a lot of open seats. Over Christmas, we had over 10,000 people walk through the doors here at our 10 different services, which was amazing. And if you were here last week, you also saw that after Christmas now, this place is just filling up. Our 10:30 service, insane. My wife and my family and I sat right over there and could not find a seat. It was ridiculous. It was awesome though, but here's the problem we have, is that there are every single week people that are pulling into our lot, particularly for the middle service, and pulling out of our lot because they can't find somewhere to park, which means that they're not coming in here to find somewhere to sit, which means that they're not hearing what God has for them that day. There's a story in the book of Acts in the Bible of a time when Paul was preaching, and it was probably a scene a lot like what we're experiencing. Like people were just flooding in, people wanted to hear. And this one particular story in chapter 17, this young kid was sitting in the window, like only place available to sit, and he falls, and then he dies, and then he gets resurrected. Like that's a church service that's an incredible church service. We don't want that. We don't want people sitting up there in the lobby and sitting on a railing. And so here's the great thing. We have no windows to fall out of, but at 10:30, we're also losing seats to sit in. So here's the request and the ask. And some of you are like, we're not at 10:30. I know. But if you ever frequent 10:30, here would be the request for the next couple of months. Could you hunker down here at the 8:45, or go to our 12:15, or if you know somebody, you've got friends that go to the 10:30 service, maybe you encourage them to come sit with you for a season here at 8:45 and convince them it's the better service to sit at anyways, because nothing would be worse than us having this whole series where we talk about sermons from the seats and having somebody that can't find a seat to hear what God has for them, that we would eventually hear the story that God's writing through them. So if you would just, with us, seriously consider how you can be a part of helping make 10:30 open up a little bit more, whether that's you continue to hunker down here or at 12:15, or invite somebody from the 10:30 to be with you, that would help us continue to open up the seats to our guests so that they can hear about Jesus who adores and loves them. So this morning, we've got some incredible things planned for you, and I think one of the best parts of it all is what we're going to do now.
Where you are, your doors are open wide. Your presence pulls my heart, invited by your smile. Finally, I can breathe. You're breathing life in me. We're standing face to face. You welcome me to stay. It feels like home. Here feels like home when I'm with you. It feels like home. Here in your love is where I belong. Here in your love is where I belong. Here in your love is where I belong. Your presence is home.
Whenever I hear a choir, one of the things I think of is how Revelation tells us in the Bible, last book of the Bible, that there are choirs of angels, and that there's this picture that we get when we read the scriptures that they are in constant song to the throne and to the person of Jesus. And it always makes me think when I hear a choir what it'll be like to hear them one day. And don't you think it will sound something like that? Like there's just something that just is powerful. And not even just in the music and in the amount of voices, but in the words too. Like I wonder if the angels actually sing those words. In your presence is home. In your presence is home. There are just certain things in life that have this ability to transport us to a feeling of home. You know what I mean? Like whenever you're away from home, do you do this? The minute I get homesick, I reach for my phone. Whenever I'm traveling, and all I have to do is look at pictures of my kids, and it makes me feel like I'm at home. Look at a picture of my wife, and it gives me that sense of home. There are certain memories even that transport you to this feeling or sense of home. There are experiences that can do that. There's even smells. Have you ever had that happen? Like you smell something, and it just brings you back to a place, and sometimes it's even to home. It's like this sense of comfort and calm. And we even have this phrase that we use, that home is where the what? Right, because there are things in life that have this unbelievable capacity, this power, this draw about them to transport us, no matter where we're at, to a feeling of, a sense of the comfort that home provides. One of the things about that song that I think is so powerful is it points to the truth that there is no greater home for your heart than living in the presence of Jesus and for the purposes of Jesus. And I don't know if you all believe that this morning. Matter of fact, I would even venture to say that probably in a room, even with so many that aren't here this morning because of the weather, there's still a ton of you here. And with this many people here, there's probably some of us in this room that don't believe that today. And I would just say, if that's you, number one, I'm so glad you're here. You belong here. Like we genuinely built this place for you. To be a place where you can ask questions, challenge, push back, doubt, disagree, all in an attempt to answer what I think are the most important questions in life. Is there a God? Who is he and what does he want? But I would also say this to you. God's nuts about you. Like he absolutely adores you. And his invitation to every single one of us is constantly this: I want you to experience home in my presence. And his invitation is always to all of us: I want you to experience a home like no other for your heart, but it's with me. So last week we started this series, Sermon from the Seats, and I don't know if you were here last week or have had the chance to listen and catch up online, but there was one thing that Steve Andrews, who was our lead pastor, and he spoke last week, there's one thing that he said last week that, honestly, I needed to hear it. So my family and I, we sat right over there, 10 rows back, and there was a moment where he said, your pain, you remember this? Can become your platform. And I don't know about your life, but I look over the course of my life, and I had a moment where I even was thinking through this last night. I don't know why. God just kind of brought these thoughts to my mind. But if I look over the course of my last 5 years, there's some really painful moments that my family and I have gone through. And I'm seeing how God is starting to use some of those painful moments is exactly what Steve said last week, my platform. It is the very things that have hurt me that he is picking me up, putting me on top of, and saying, these are the things that I will use you through. And I will use through you as well. And so I thought last week was just an incredible way to start off the series. So here's what I want to talk to you about this morning, though, is I want to talk about this idea that the song set us into, is home. And not just specifically the idea that God's presence is home, but more specifically, that there is no greater home, there is no greater thing to live for than God's presence and God's purposes. And so that's what I want us to kind of lean into this morning. But before we do, I just want to pray for a minute and ask that God would be just clear in how he speaks. Because here's what I believe every time I take a stage like this. Nobody needs to hear from me today. I don't need to hear from me. You don't need to hear from me. We all need to hear from Jesus. So let me ask him to speak clearly to us. Father in heaven, I just want first of all to acknowledge that you are. You are Lord, you are maker, you are creator. You are God over all things. And we just acknowledge that you are good and you are mighty and you are holy and that you are present. Acknowledge that there's a reality that we do not see with our physical eyes. Even being reminded of it myself, coming out of that music and the choir, just this reality that there is an existence of angelic beings in this very moment while we sit in this room, that they're standing around a throne. And they are singing and they are worshiping, and that's happening right now while we're here. That's happening. And yet somehow your presence that is there being sung to by angel armies is also right here in this room. And so God, you who are present in this room, would you also speak to us? Would you just be so clear as to let us, as we sit in here this morning, hear exactly what it is that you have for us to hear from you? And will we hear it so clear that as we walk out the doors today, we would be different because of it. And then we would live different as a result of it. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so I want to start off giving you what's going to be a key verse for us this morning right away. So if you have a Bible, I encourage you to go ahead and grab that right now. If you don't have a Bible, or if you're even trying to figure out still how to navigate the pages of it, we put everything on screen, so no worries. But this comes from a book in the Bible called James. And James was a brother to Jesus, also a martyr. Interesting story of James, though, is he did not begin that way. James actually started off as a supreme skeptic of Jesus, thought Jesus was a little bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs nuts, did not think he was God. But when you watch your brother crucified and raised from the dead, that will change your opinion of what you thought of his claims to be God very quickly. So James goes on to be a devoted follower of Jesus, also becomes one of the contributing authors to the Bible, and he writes a verse about life and its brevity and its uncertainty, and it almost makes you wonder if he didn't write this in part in reflection of his own life, realizing that there was a period of time that he had wasted and he had lost to be able to live devoted to Jesus. This is what James writes, verse 13. Now listen, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go to this city or that city and spend a year there, carry on business and make money. Well, you don't even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are would you say the word? What? You're a mist. You are a mist that appears for a little while and then it vanishes. There's a sobering reality to that one word and that reality, that truth, that your life is a mist. Gone. Like, here's your life. You ready? I don't care if you live 100 plus years. In the span of all eternity, this is your life. Done. Some of you are like, I'm really glad I didn't sit in the front row. I can stream it if you want. But that's it. Life. Here it is. 100 years. Done. Because one of the things that the Bible teaches us about all of us, regardless of what you think about Jesus this morning, is that all of us are created to be eternal beings. Because we're not just physical. We have this soul within us that never ends. It goes on for eternity. So you've probably already noticed the rope hanging down this morning. Maybe some of you are like, somebody didn't finish their job today. Nope, it's intentional. Here's what I want you to picture all morning long. This rope is your eternal existence that just goes on and on and on and on and on. And do you see this part right here? That's your life on this side of eternity. This black wind at the very beginning is your, let's call it 85 years of life. And then there's all the rest of that. And the Bible says this is true for every single one of us. This is this part of life. This is everything else. If that's true, then there should be one question that drives us like no other in this life. And it's going to drive us this morning. And the question is just simply this. What are you living for? Like, what are you living your life for? Not what others think you're living your life for, not what you tell people you're living your life for. Like, what are you honestly living your life for? And then here's a follow-up question. Does it really matter? Like, whatever it is that you would say, this is the pursuit of my life, does it really honestly matter in the scope of all of eternity? Does it matter? Because have you ever seen somebody that's lived like just a portion of life with such tunnel vision that they end up like neglecting everything else around them, oftentimes to their own detriment? You know what I mean? Like maybe it's a job, they're like so tunnel focused on a job, or a relationship is like so tunnel focused on a relationship, or a hobby, it's like they're so tunnel focused on a hobby that they neglect the larger realities of things all around them. Like if you've ever had the conversation with somebody where you've said the phrase, "What were you thinking?" Like then that's that kind of moment. Or if somebody ever said that to you, you were probably guilty of it as well. Maybe it was a moment you lived tunnel vision on something and you compromised everything else around you. Kind of like this guy I saw on the news recently. Look at this story. This is a headline that some of you will resonate with. California man accidentally sets apartment on fire while trying to kill a spider. Some of you are like, I am with him. I would burn down the block to kill a spider. I get that brother's pain, right? Like, but here's what I wonder. How many of us do that? How many of us have come to believe that the pursuit that we are on in life right now, like whatever it is that we're living for is so important, but the truth is what we're doing is neglecting the larger reality around us. Here's what I want you to do this morning. Would you humor me and participate a little bit? Say this out loud. Just say, ignore the spider. Now look to somebody next to you and tell them, ignore the spider. Because I'm convinced that for some of us, maybe a lot of us, I think there are things that we are pursuing in life with such passion that that's really all we're doing, is we're trying to get our hands on the spider to the neglect of the larger reality and picture of life around us. And here's the really frightening thing. The spider doesn't always have to be something bad. As a matter of fact, many times it's not. It can be good, beautiful, beneficial things, but just not what God has made you for, and not what he has made to be your number one pursuit. That's why I like Francis Chan. He's a pastor and an author, and I love what he says once because I think it resonates with that. He said on your screen, our greatest fear should not be of failure, right? Because so many of us live with this idea we're going to fail at everything, or we're posers, we're going to be found out. But our greatest fear should be of succeeding in life at things that don't really matter. Like, let that soak in for a minute. Your greatest fear should not be at failing, but actually it's succeeding at things that just don't matter. There's a book I was turned on to recently called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. It was written by a hospice nurse. Her name is Bonnie Ware. So she writes this book after years and years of sitting on the bedside with men and women who were getting to the end of their life. And when you're spending time with people that are about to breathe their last breath, there's a different way that they look at life, with priorities and values and purpose, as well as regrets. And she hears regret after regret for years, she writes in this book. And she says that almost all of them fell into one of 5 different categories that end up becoming the chapters and the headings for this book. So here's what they are. I want to give them to you quickly from kind of number 5 down to number 1. She says number 5 was this: people wishing that they had let themselves be happier. That was a regret. Number 4 regret was people wishing that they had stayed in touch with friends. Number 3 regret was people wishing that they had been more courageous to express their feelings. Number 2 regret was people wishing that they hadn't worked so hard. Like all of these things are the product of people saying, at some point or another, I was living for the spider, and I was neglecting the more important reality of life around me. But here was the number 1 regret that she heard over and over again. No matter how it was phrased, this is what it came down to. Is people wishing that they had had the courage to live their true life and not the life that others expected of them. But here's a question. If that's genuinely a regret that people have, the question is, well, what's your true life? And how do you know what your true life is supposed to be? So there's a story that we're going to look at in the Bible for a few minutes in Luke chapter 10. So you might want to beat me there before I get there. Luke chapter 10. And in Luke 10, we see the story of 2 sisters. And this one moment between these 2 sisters where, frankly, the one sister is making choice not to live the expectations of the people around her, and in doing so lives out what is her true purpose and priority. Luke chapter 10 begins this way in verse 38. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. And she had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was, just say it, what is it? Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. So she came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, ignore the spider. It's not really what he said. He said, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. And Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. So as best we can tell, this group of friends is actually a very close personal group of friends to Jesus. And they appear a couple different places and a couple different times and scenarios throughout the pages of the Bible. But in this one specific story, you've got these two sisters, both in the presence of Jesus, and yet both experiencing him very differently. And their lives at this point are honestly on an entirely separate trajectory. And all of it is separated between them by one word. Hopefully you caught it because I made you say it out loud. It's what? Distraction. Distraction. Here's the reality of the story. Martha was distracted by all the things around her life, while Mary is focused in on the one thing that gives her life. In 2000, there's a pastor named John Piper who spoke at this huge event, which is so weird even to think 2000 was 20 years ago now. Remember when we thought the computers were going to take over the world and turn into Terminators? Anyway, so 18 years ago, so a few years after this event happened, I was able to hear this message that John Piper gave to this audience of thousands of people. And it became, because of a story I want to share with you that he told, it became probably one of his most ever looked up, quoted, tweeted, responded to messages. He tells this story when he walks up onto the stage in front of all these people. This is what he says. Like, he walks out and he just says this. 3 weeks ago, we got news at our church that Ruby Eliason and Laura Edwards were killed in Cameroon. Ruby was over 80 years old, single her whole life, and a nurse. She had poured her life out into one thing, to make Jesus Christ known among the sick and the poor in the hardest, most unreached places. Laura Edwards, a medical doctor in the Twin Cities and in her retirement, partnered up with Ruby. She also pushing 80 and going from village to village in Cameroon. On their drive, the brakes went out. Over a cliff they went, and they were instantly gone. Two women in their 80s, almost an entire life devoted to one idea: Jesus Christ magnified among the poor and the sick in the hardest places of the earth. And then he turns to the audience and he asks them this question: do you think that was a tragedy? And then he kind of pauses them for a moment. He keeps going on. And he pulls out a copy of a Reader's Digest magazine and he just simply reads a few lines from a story in there. And this is what he read. Bob and Penny took early retirement from their jobs in the Northeast 5 years ago. And she was 59. He was 51. Now they live in Punta Gorda, Florida, where they cruise on their 30-foot trawler, play softball, and collect seashells. And then he turned to the audience and he said, my friends, that is a tragedy. Because you have this juxtaposed storyline of these two women who give their lives to Jesus and die essentially in this blaze of glory over a cliff in their car. But you have this other couple who have lived their entire lives to collect seashells, all to get to the end and go, I lived for the spider. Life is a what? It's a mist. Life is a mist. So what are you living yours for? What are you living your life for? And I know some of you, you're, even right now, internally, you're deeply disagreeing with me. And if we were to have a one-on-one conversation, you might say things to me like, listen, man, I have to work hard and retirement's important. Why would you criticize retirement and getting to the end? And there's not going to be anything left for us in Social Security anyway, so we need to put everything away in our 401k that we can. Or you might say, you know what? It's not bad to enjoy what we've worked hard for our entire lives. Or you might look at somebody else and you compare yourself and go, look, they live far more frivolous than I do. Look, we live way more conservative. We still give and we serve. Or you might even just try and trump the whole conversation and say, listen, man, we can't all take the Mother Teresa vow of poverty. And I would just say back to you, this is not a conversation about retirement and poverty and vows of. It's not a conversation about houses and homes and cars. It is a conversation, it is a message about priorities. And I just want to ask you this morning an honest question. What are you living your life for? Where's your heart? And what are you pursuing? And is it possible that you're living your life in such a way as to try to get your hands on the spider to the neglect and to the destruction of something far more important? Your soul and your purpose and the reason that God has put you on this rock. I mean, isn't that part of the reason why the Bible teaches, some of you know this, that you can gain the whole world, every bit of it, all the fame, all the pleasure, all the money, everything. You can gain it all and still what? Lose your soul still. Like, what are you living for? And does it really matter? Does it really matter? See, because for Martha, she's in the presence of Jesus, but she's living for all the wrong things in this moment. And so she does what we try to do when this is our life. We try to get God to care about what we care about. That's why she goes to him and she says, hey, Jesus, would you tell my sister to get up and come help? Would you tell her to be about what I'm about right now? She's trying to get priorities shifted. She's got the wrong priority. I have the right priority. Can you get her to care about what I care about? Ultimately saying, Jesus, you need to care about what I care about. And what's his answer? No. And not only no, he says this. Hey, she picked the better thing. And I won't take it from her. Do you realize that we can actually pray to God about things that he doesn't care about? And that's not because he doesn't care about you. It's because there are times that we're living for the spider and we want him to care about it and we bring it to him and he's going, you know what I realize? I realize that thing that you think is so important is taking life out of you. I want to put life in you. So I don't care about that thing because you've chosen wrong. That's what he says to Martha, your sister, she chose right. And I'm not going to take this from her. And the thing that I love so much about Mary is this isn't like a one and done moment for her. This genuinely is how she was living her life. There's this other story in another part of the Bible that we're going to look at right now in John chapter 12. John chapter 12 verse 1 says this. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. And here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Did you know that? Did you know this part of the story that Jesus had dinner with Lazarus after he raised him? Like, that must have been a crazy dinner. Like, how do you talk about anything but that event in that moment, but there's nothing said about it here? Like, I want to know all about that moment. But that doesn't happen. Here a dinner was given in Jesus' honor. Martha served, while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. And then Mary took out a pint of pure nard, expensive perfume, and poured it on the feet of Jesus, and then wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. My son, I have 3 kids, and my oldest is 16. And at any given moment, you can guarantee that in his room, there is a variety of bottles with smells and scents that overwhelm our house, from colognes to Axe body spray. And a couple months ago, I ran out of cologne. I was like, I need cologne. So I'm like, I knew I could go to his room and find something. So sure enough, I go in there, I find a bottle of cologne, I take a couple squirts, like literally 3 squirts, and he comes in at that point, and he like loses it on me. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm using your cologne. He's like, that's my best cologne. It's like Nautica Sport. It's like his favorite cologne. He's like, that's my favorite cologne, Dad. You can't use my cologne. I'm like, what are you freaking out about? That's all I did. You have a whole bottle of it. And he starts arguing with me. He's like, you're going to have to buy me new cologne. I'm like, what? So I'm like getting mad at him. I looked at him at one point and I go, I gave you life. You can give me cologne. He's like, settle down, Dad. You can have my cologne. I'm like, all right. Like, this is not Nautica Sport. As a matter of fact, if we read on in the passage in the next couple of verses, it makes it very clear that this bottle of perfume, this jar of perfume, is worth an entire year's salary. Like, this is a very expensive jar. This is not cheap. This is a big deal, big moment when she pours this out and just dumps it on his feet nonetheless. Like when we're talking about this kind of money, that's a big deal, right? Because I'm just going to go out on a limb and assume that nobody in this room has either perfume or cologne at home that costs you an entire year's worth of whatever you make, right? I've got some nice cologne. Doesn't cost me anywhere near a year what I have made. And I don't care what era you live in or what culture you're in. All of us would benefit from an extra year worth of our salary or our income. And yet, here's the truth. When you've got that much money in one thing, it's not just money anymore. There's a story behind that. It's effort, it's accomplishment, it's power, it's identity, it's security. And here's the thing. What Mary does with that jar, this is what I want to do with my life. And it's what I pray you will see is the greatest way to spend your life. Years ago, I had a friend who used to make pottery. And she came to me one day and she gave me this jar. And I don't know if you can see it really well, but it doesn't look like it came out right. So she tells me this story about how it didn't. And there was something wrong with the process in the kiln, and it came out all janky. And she was about to throw it away. And she had this moment where she felt like God spoke to her and said, don't throw that away. And where he began to press into places in her that she felt were deformed and ugly. And he said, here's the thing you need to know. You are my masterpiece. And for all the areas that you see as broken or messed up or warped, I put my hand to those places and I made you and I formed you. And you're my masterpiece. And so that this piece became for her like this central identity, this moment of reflection back whenever she felt insecure, whenever she felt broken, whenever she felt unworthy, whenever she felt ugly, whenever she felt what she remembered, I am God's masterpiece. So this literally became the centerpiece in her showroom. She had countless offers to buy it, never sold it. And then when I planted a church years ago, she gave it to me. And she said, I always want you to remember, even at your most broken moments, your most insecure moments, that no matter what you see, God sees a masterpiece. Here's why I tell you that story. Because we all have a jar. It's our life. We all have one. But the thing is, we don't live like Mary usually. That's not the pursuit of our life, is to dump ourselves out to Jesus. The pursuit of our life is to fill this thing, not empty it. Is that we keep trying to fill it with power, fill it with relationships, fill it with experiences, fill it with pleasure, fill it with success, fill it with homes. We just keep trying to fill it. And then we also fill it with other stuff, like pain and brokenness and shame, mistakes, regret. And what this ends up becoming for us is a jar of what we're pursuing and also oftentimes what we feel defined by. And I think what God invites us to do with this is what Mary did, which is to take it and pour us, ourselves, out constantly and regularly at the feet of Jesus, where we would learn to live in his presence and for his purposes. And the incredible thing is, when we start to live that way, what he begins to do is he starts to fill us. He fills us with his purposes. He fills us with his plans. He fills us with his love. He fills us with his vision. He fills us with his legacy. And when we let God fill us up, and then we keep pouring ourselves out to him, he keeps filling up, and we pour out, and he fills up. And when we really learn to do this, to make Jesus our number one priority in life, and learn to sit regularly like Mary at his feet, just emptying ourselves to him, he leads us to live a legacy like nothing else. So what I love about this story, as a matter of fact, when you look at another account of it in the book of Matthew, the book of Matthew tells us this about that same story where they're having dinner and she pours out this perfume. Verse 13 of chapter 26, Jesus says, truly I tell you this, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she, talking about Mary and what she just did, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. And 2,000 years later, we're talking about this woman that grew up and lived and died in the Middle East named Mary for one reason, because she had learned to live so committed to Jesus that her whole life was about being in his presence and living for his purposes, not her own. And he filled her. Life is a mist, and yours and mine will be gone like that. What are you living yours for? And does it really matter? We're going to watch a video this morning of a woman who I think her story is so powerful in the fact that she had learned to live so committed to the presence of Jesus that stories are still being told about her. Legacies will be created in her son's life as a result of the fact that her life was about being poured out to the person and to the presence of Jesus. As the video is playing in a minute, we're also going to take up our offering this morning during this video. And so here's what I just know this morning, if you're new or just visiting with us, that this is not a moment we're trying to get anything out of you. This is a moment that we celebrate what God is doing in us, and we celebrate what God does through us as well. And all the things that we accomplish as a church is ultimately because of moments like this and because of your generosity. So as the bags go by in just a minute, I'm going to ask you, if you're new and you're just checking things out here, then feel comfortable to let that pass by. But if this is your church, this is your home, then you do what's appropriate in the next few moments. This is Elizabeth Dalton.
Liz was a beautiful mother. She loved it. She loved children. It was her lifelong dream to have a child. She adored Micah. She prayed over him. She loved him. She spent all her time with him, loved making him laugh. Relating to children, Liz just gave her all. Liz and I met at church we were attending. At the time, I was a youth pastor, and she was looking to volunteer and help out with the youth group. She played many different instruments, and she led the worship for the teens at that time. So it was probably, 25 years ago. Somehow 20 years passed, and you realize that she became your best friend. And most of it was due to raising how many youth coming through and relating to them and getting to love them together and being a part of everyone's life, that you became more a part of each other's life. I was engaged, and we ended up breaking off the engagement. So I was heartbroken by that because I wanted to have children. And I talked for probably about 8 years about it. She's like, if I ever get to 40, we're still going to have children. Each of us can adopt our own children. We can help each other out. When she turned 40, we looked at adoption and found out it was outrageous. We talked to one of our friends who was a doctor, and she suggested doing it medically. Looked into it, and that was $3,000, much better economically. So we decided to go ahead, and both of us tried it. Liz was very unsuccessful at first. She dealt with a couple miscarriages and things like that. I, on the other hand, got Josiah. Then she got pregnant. She was due in August 2018. Everything kind of changed when we went for her mid-pregnancy scan. I went along with her and her mother. We were there, and they said, hey, I think we found something. It looks like you might have a cyst on your ovaries. We don't know what it is, but we need to look into it. We found out she had, in fact, had stage 4 stomach cancer. Around 20 weeks, she started to have to do chemo with the baby. It was one of the only chemotherapies safe for her. They had to deliver Micah early. He was born July 2nd, and he was healthy. Liz's cancer progressed, and we had decided to stay home and that she was going to do hospice in home. We wanted her to be with the boys and be with the family because she was concerned for them. She was concerned for her family. Her first and foremost thought was that everyone knew her heart for them and that everyone was right with God. She started getting sicker and sicker. So it was less time that she could spend because she became very, very weak. But she at least was at home where she could hold her baby and love on Micah. Danny came to visit Liz and I at the house.
I came in, shook hands, met everyone. There was 2 little beautiful babies there. The grandparents were there. And then Jennifer walked me down the hallway to see Elizabeth, which was her best friend. And we went right into the room, same layout as my childhood home as I used to sleep in. Same exact thing. So I sat at the foot of the bed. I introduced myself to Elizabeth. We smiled, we talked. Jennifer sat down and we just started talking. And we talked about life and Jesus. Elizabeth was in and out of consciousness at that point. So we just kept talking, and sometimes I'd grab her foot and we'd laugh and we'd have these conversations. And then at one point, Jennifer said, hey, we want to talk about the memorial service that we want to do. And the minute she said that, Elizabeth sat up in bed and she was so animated. Okay, this is what I want. And the service, I've already thought about it. I know everything. And she got so much energy. And at one point she looks at me and she said, listen, I don't care who does the sermon. I don't know if you're going to do the service or someone else. It doesn't matter. But I've already written my sermon. And this is what I want you to say. And she proceeded to go through her sermon, what she already written and what she wanted people to hear from her. And I didn't have anything to write down, so I'm like, oh Lord, let my memory hold these thoughts.
It was really neat because Liz was very weak. But of course, when you talk about Jesus, she became very clear-minded, very strong. She was able to share her strong faith with him and how much she loved her Lord. And it was like someone who came in that was an old friend.
When I got in my car and started driving, I thought, wow, I was really moved by Elizabeth. I think I cried most of the way home. When you see a young life, she's relatively young, late 30s, early 40s, and you see kids and you see these things. And then you watch someone navigate it so powerfully. I don't know if she knew how powerful she was in her weakest state.
The day of the funeral was really kind of a blur a little bit. Danny did the sermon. He did a beautiful job of sharing it.
I had the honor to say, this is not my message. This is actually the message that I got from Elizabeth, and I'm going to give Elizabeth's message to you today. And then I proceeded to tell the message. What I learned from her sermon was amazing, actually, because both her and her friend Jennifer were in ministry, their whole friendship. And they were in different kinds of ministry, so they connected with all different kinds of churches. And one of the passions of my heart has been unity. And the first thing that Elizabeth said to me is, make sure you tell everyone that we are to be unified in Christ. God calls us to unification in John 17. And it resonated with me because I've been thinking about that so much. And then she proceeded to say 2 things that I thought really changed for me. That our life is a vapor. It's this mist. That's what Scripture says. It's just this moment that is here and goes. Make sure you spend your life on the right things. And then the last part was, what are you pouring your life out for? What are you giving your life for? And she got so passionate at that point, and she said, we have to give our life for Christ. That is the only thing worth our life.
All the time I've known Liz, I've learned so much about Jesus, how to give yourself to him every day and every moment, how to make Jesus a part of everything we do and include him in our thoughts and include him in our lives and include him in our relationships. She was a very peaceful, loving person. She gave everything she had, and she'd be able to get anything done and organize anything. I hear daily how people miss her. She was a school counselor, and I still get Facebooked from students that miss her and how they were impacted by how she loved them. More than anything, I want Micah to know that his mother was a woman of God, and that her desire was that he grew up to be a man of God. And not at age 20 or 30, but as a child on, that he could be a man of God.
those kinds of lives and examples are the thing that actually have eternal value. Like, that shaped my heart. That shaped my life. I barely know Elizabeth. Still to this day, I hardly know her at all. But I can say that that moment and her faith changed me forever. And I was with her for 30 minutes of my life. And I'm different.
I always wanted to be part of the crowd because it was safe, but it's not worth it. It's so much more. It's more fun too. Plus you get what you want in the end. Hearing God say, you did what I wanted. You did what I asked.
So what would be said about you, about me, when the mist of our lives has disappeared? The Apostle Paul once talked about how he was able to so fully devote himself to Jesus because he was a guy that was single and wasn't married. And there's probably few things in life that can be so gut-wrenching and painful as living single and wanting to be in a relationship. And yet Paul said, you know what? Because I'm not living just for this, I'm living for that. I'm going to embrace that and pour myself into the kingdom. And that's what I love about that story. You've got two women that could have gone, you know what? We're just going to be mad and we're going to be spiteful and we're just going to live to only have the relationships that we want in this part of our life. But for whatever reason, the marriages didn't work out that they were pursuing and relationships didn't work out. And so it's kind of like the story that John Piper told. They just decided, fine, then we're going to pour ourselves into the church and into our relationship with Jesus. And hey, let's support each other in this journey. And they realized that life wasn't just about this, but Elizabeth realized life is about this. And yet here's the sad reality for so many. And maybe some of us in the room need to wake up to this being true for our own lives today. We're living just for this. And you know what? We're not even just living for this. For so many of us, all of life is really, it's about this part right here. We call retirement. It's where we collect the seashells. And we neglect all of the rest. Does that make any sense? If this really is the life that you will live, it is the existence you are destined for forever and for eternity, that we put all of the energy into this part and neglect the rest of it. What are you living for? And does it really matter? There's a guy who wrote a poem. His name's C.T. Studd. Like, what a name. He wrote this poem a while ago called Only What's Done for Christ Will Last. These are the lyrics. Some of you may recognize them. These are the lines. Only one life will soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last. Now here's the thing. There's a lesser known part of this poem at the very end, which is where my heart feels like it starts to come alive. And when I'm dying, how happy I'll be if the lamp of my life has been burned out for thee. Here's the only real challenge I want to give you this morning as a way of application. I'm going to challenge you every day for the remainder of this series to pray a very simple prayer to Jesus. And you might go, I don't know how to pray. I'm going to give you the words. It's really easy. I just want you to find a moment in sincerity to offer these words up to him. And you might go, I don't even know if he exists yet. That's okay. He's convinced of his existence, even if you're not yet, so you can talk to him still. And these are the words. You ready? You may want to write them down. You just say this to him every day for the remainder of this series and see what he begins to do. Jesus, tune my heart to your presence and my hands to your purposes, and see what he begins to say in response. Life is a mist. What are you living yours for? And does it really matter?
In the morning when I rise to meet you, in the morning when I lift my eyes, you're the only one I voices rise, our creation cries, singing out in endless Alleluia. From this moment on, join with heaven's song, singing out in endless Alleluia. And in the moments where you go unnoticed, in the ordinary day to day, countless miracles of life around us point like arrows to your name. So let our voices rise, all creation cries, singing out in endless Alleluia. From this moment on, join with heaven's song, singing out in endless Alleluia.
Okay, new thought. Not only am I excited about the choir in heaven, I hope they have a choir director like Aaron. Oh. An angelic director. So this morning on the way here, I lost the key fob to my car. I got here, I turned it off and realized I had no fob and I had no way to turn it back on. Instantaneously, it became, listen, the distraction that occupied all of my thoughts, which is ridiculous because I'm coming in here to talk to all of you over the course of 3 services about living so focused that we're not trying to get our hands on the spider. We're living for the bigger purpose of eternity in Jesus. And all I could do the minute I walked in was spider, spider, spider. And I feel like I had this moment where God even went, hey, you're doing it right now. You're doing it right now. There's something bigger here. Live for something bigger. Don't be too occupied with this. Do you know in the Bible, one of the accusations made against the disciples, Acts chapter 12, is that all the stirring they were creating by walking around, spreading the message and the hope and the love of Jesus, this was literally what was said of them, the criticism of them, and why so many of them were being put to death. This is what was said. These men are turning the world upside down. It's freaking everybody out. That was 12 men committed to pouring out their lives to Jesus, to living in his presence and to living for his purposes. If 12 men can turn the world upside down, what could the thousands do that call this place home? We could change everything. But it starts with you committing to live your life poured out to Jesus. May we be men and women committed to live so passionately and so focused as to make our life all about the presence of Jesus and the purposes of Jesus. Would you continue to pray that with me all series long? Tune my heart to your presence and my hands to your purposes. Don't forget, this week is midweek. We hope you'll come back and celebrate with us. You are loved. If we can serve you down at the front stage, we have people that are here to pray with you and encourage you before you leave. As to the rest of you, have a great Sunday. Drive safe. We'll see you next week.